Good afternoon, and welcome to this third session of these 2 days on this event organized by the Emilia-Romagna authorities, along with the Union Cameri research centers, and talk and discuss about innovation and research for development, and say how these drivers have an impact on the territory and how they can become a tool to invest, to draw investments. We will be talking about this, and especially with reference to the new economy. So, over the next hour, we will be discussing the industrial programs in Emilia-Romagna, which has a huge industry development presence. And secondly, we will be discussing how this industry is undergoing major changes. A new paradigm is unfolding, an economic paradigm, a business paradigm, which sees new players coming into the aerospace industry, and therefore new business opportunities. So we will be discussing this. But before I introduce you to the protagonists of this panel discussion, let me start with Vincenzo Colla, who is the Councillor for Economic Development, Green Economy, Employment, Training in the Emilia-Romagna region. So welcome, Mr. Colla. Let's talk about Emilia-Romagna. You have several industry districts, manufacturing specializations. You are, and you rank among the first regions in Italy for exports. So what you're going to do, and tell me if I understand your ambitions, is to have a bigger space in the area of aerospace industry because of your manufacturing experience in your region. So tell us, what tools are you using, and what is the strategy that you are implementing to strengthen this manufacturing orientation in your region? Thank you very much, and let me thank the members of the panel, and let me thank Arte and the Sole 24 Ore for this wonderful initiative that you're organizing. Let me come to your question. We cannot afford to stop with regard to the evolution of innovation. Innovation is going at a speed that has to be managed, and it has to be made available for the social and economic fabric of this region. We have to constantly being up to standard. Now, besides buzzwords, we understood that there was a strategic industry, even more so than what was thought before by the manufacturing industry. The aerospace economy, aeronautics, several companies with high-tech skills that produce quality components for this industry, but there was not a system as such. There was no relation with the local government. When we speak of technologies, Emilia-Romagna helps its government, but it needs its government as well. So there is more up there on the top than there is down here. So if I want to be part of the change at this level, I need to understand what is happening in space. Let's forget the idea of the missile Cold War. That is something of the past. In space now, there's a technological battle going on. There's a technological game. We are actually clashing technologically. Think of communications, geolocalization, think of infrastructures, think of studying the environment. And we said that we are able here in this region to provide a platform with regard to this new industry. And we made an important agreement on the 26th of May with the Italian aeronautics, um military aeronautics. The government signed an agreement which I believe is very, very interesting in terms of how it was conceived. I'd like to thank, for instance, Andrea Pontremoli, who will be speaking later, who in the agreement provided consulting advice and support to the initiative. And then Mr. Colonel Villaday, the astronaut, he is involved because there's a private-public interaction in terms of the investments. The recovery resilience plan, for instance, is devoted to aerospace. And if we look at the US investments and Europe as well, are making huge investments in aerospace, but on a platform that brings together the manufacturing industry, studies of materials, chemistry, food, big data. We have the largest European big data center here, and we want to make it available. For these technologies, we want to create a new manufacturing which is in line with aerospace, and this means creating quality employment. These are value chains of quality and can create quality jobs, an academic value chain too that goes in that same direction. The University of Bologna, if we look at the airport of Forlì, you think it's a small airport. We have engineering there, high-tech engineering, and we want to use that airport as a new idea for engineering in aerospace, for new talents, to draw talents, attract talents, and that platform is also for attracting talents. And we want to create an observatory on the new dynamics of the platform for manufacturing needs in the aerospace industry. This region will want to establish alliances. We inform the minister of this, but we want to enter from the main door and not from the windows or from the back door. When the Emiliani and the Romagnoli, the citizens of this region, decide to enter an industry, not only will they do that, but they will conquer an excellent position as well. Now, you mentioned this briefly earlier, Councillor. This is a region of extraordinary government and public resources. We have the recovery plan and the new European plans alongside that. What projects in aerospace may compete to obtain funds from the Resilience and Recovery Fund? Anything you've been working on lately? Well, on some projects, I can give you the guidelines because we have to keep certain things somewhat classified, but the cosmonaut, the astronaut that is here and will be speaking shortly, military aeronautics will send him to work at the project in Houston in the US. If, of course, you want to make an alliance, you have to go to the ocean and not to the pond. And we're establishing an alliance with Houston and Texas through the embassies to make sure that the public investments that the US are making with our country. Italy has a very strong relationship with the US on these investments, and there are major investments in manufacturing on this platform for manufacturing materials, but also of the idea of how life is in space. One of the elements of how the space can provide answers to our future, for our future, we have to begin to think about these investments right now. When Kennedy embarked on the Moon project, which was a political project, more than 3 million patents followed, which changed the history of Western countries. So, being part of this new approach to the aerospace means new patents for manufacturing techniques and for technology components and elements, which will help qualify the lives of our cities and our countries that will then have spin offs on the other traditional industries. Now, we have specific projects heading in this direction. Shortly, we shall be able to present them and make them public. We have large companies involved. We have multinationals that have decided to come to this platform. And because all this is in progress, I can't mention the name of the companies. If Andrea Pontremoli does this, it's okay, but I can't do this. I can't give you the numbers, I can't give you the names. Ask Andrea Pontremoli this question. If he answers, that's fine with me. All right, I'll ask him. You will recall Il Sole 24 when you are ready to make these items of news official. How can a councillor work without Il Sole 24 and vice versa? Likewise for the Il Sole 24 how can we do without a councillor? All right, so we'll meet again to see what will follow in Emilia-Romagna along these projects. I'm going to introduce you to some of the other members of the panel. Let me start with Mauro Piermaria, in charge of innovation and new space economy for the Italian Space Agency. Then we have Paolo Tortora, director of Ciri Aerospace, and Walter Villadei, astronaut. My children were left out of this room. They wanted to see the astronaut. I told them that he was not going to be wearing his space uniform, and so they're out of the room. So there's no threat from my children. So let's start with you, Ms. Piermaria. The space economy is opening. The new space economy is opening up for technology and research in space. Many things are changing in terms of paradigms and in terms of the protagonists of this space race and research, with new roles of the private industry and startups. Elon Musk has taught us that you can go to space from nothing, although that is not exactly literally to be taken as true. But anyway, can you tell us how the Italian Space Agency is working, how it is organized to embrace and coordinate this change?
Of course, good evening, everyone, and thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure to be here with you today. So, addressing these themes, these topics, and spreading them is important also for us as a aerospace agency. We have quite a solid base we're starting from because the counselor um, seemed pretty expert. He used the right terminology, so I'm really proud to see that this kind of concepts have become and have entered into the ever entered the institutions. So we know Emilia Romagna is quite far-sighted, but then I see they are quite prepared and ready to address these topics with the right terminology and words. But indeed, regions, Italian regions, are crucial partners for us as aerospace agency, and we work with all Italian regions that have an interest in aerospace, and Emilia-Romagna is one of them. So, speaking about space economies, this is a complicated question, the one you asked me, so thank you for that. What I can do is speaking about our organization as aerospace agency. But first, I'd like to define it. What is the space or aerospace economy, as is often called? Well, normally, historically, let's say, in the past, the space only big government agencies dealt with aerospace issues. So the big agencies, governmental agencies, so huge organizations basically. But recently, I would like say, or at least for us in Italy, everything started around the year 2016 when these novelties translated into something concrete, into reality actually. And because space, I mean, in the past was considered as something very far, as a research difficult to fund, and so on and so forth. But now space has come closer to us, and it is actually closer than it seems. And in everyday life, we do many things, we use many objects that are directly related to the space and the aerospace industry. This is the reality. And this awareness has grown throughout time, and thanks especially to specific drivers. First driver was the presence of private organizations, institutions, partners that have started to invest in space with, of course, a profit perspective. And we know that this we have personalities such as Branson, Elon Musk, so very wealthy, rich people that have used their incredible richnesses to invest in the space, maybe because I don't know, it's a childhood dream. But despite all that, beyond all that, there is also a profit objective. So this is the first element, the presence of private. Then, secondly, technology has evolved enormously. Things have come smaller and cheaper. So access to space has become actually space has become more accessible. And then the role of public organizations. I mean, NASA had a role in investing these missions. So let's acknowledge the role of public institutions in stimulating these new markets. And they did so with funding that eventually generated a series of business activities that developed in parallel. So, as an Italian agency, the Italian agency had to organize, to set up itself, and create the department, which is the one I am responsible for, and which deals with innovation, technological transference, technological um, change, but also vice versa, because on the other hand, technologies, Earth technology is going on space, and we have um, very few examples of technologies that have contributed to decrease the spatial costs. And then the availability of data. When I was the young, I used to speak of a megabyte, then terabyte, and shortly we will have a new unit of measure. So this is the incredible amount of data available to us today, and we need to make the most of them. And of course, they can be used for business activities with an financial return, but also paying attention to the social return because future life may eventually become more sustainable thanks to all this data. For example, last week, G7 was held, and all countries agreed on aerospace project in a sustainable way. So aerospace activities can support daily activities in a sustainable way. Of course, our activities are not sustainable in itself, are sustainable, sorry, in itself, because when we send someone to the space, the person has to live there without wasting anything. So we are sustainable by definition. Thank you, Per Maria. And one second question for you. I'd like to know which are technologies which are likely to develop more. I'm thinking of nanosatellites, for example. So, do you think there are technologies which are likely to develop more rapidly? Of course, as the counselor said earlier, well, one example is the materials. I believe that many benefits will derive from that. I give you an example, which is one of the moon mission, for example, the PENIS program, which will take the moon with the man to the moon to live a period there. So to live on the moon, we need everything, basically everything that we need here on the Earth. For example, I need tables, chairs, design, or we will need smart models to create all these stuff to create with the materials that we will find there because we cannot bring everything from home. So, for example, 3D print using moon materials and design how to structure this using more efficient models, more efficient designs. We will need a GPS to know where we are located. As we use GPS on the Earth, GPS will be even more important on the Moon, where the point of reference are very few. We will need a farm. We will need farming. We will need to produce food. So the whole process of decision farming, sustainable farming, to be to be done with what will be available. Because which is actually what we are doing here on the Earth. I mean, if we find solutions that work for the Moon, we can replicate the same solutions here on the Earth because they will be viable and effective also here. So this is one topic. And as for the second topic, I again quote the counselor. So big data. We have a billion of data going around us, and current techniques are not sufficient to process all these data. So what is needed, is artificial intelligence. As the artificial intelligence is the only one able to process such a huge amount of data. So it is not it is not by it's not by chance that there is an increasing number of startups in this very sector, in this very field. So this is very field. So this is another very important segment. So thank you very much for your analysis. Very visionary field, a visionary industry. So thank you very much. I give the floor to Andrea Pontremoli. So as I said earlier, Elon Musk showed us that from the automotive industry we can see everything, we can expect everything from the automotive industry. So what's your role, what's Dallara role in this mission?
Thank you and good afternoon. Well, starting from Elon Musk, for 4 years we've now been working with him on the SpaceX uh, uh, project. He's sent us a compliment letter mentioning our resilience during the COVID pandemic, saying that we had helped him reach the space station, and there is much attention to automotive industry and to space industry. We are involved in three areas: light material research, carbon fibers, used in space technologies, lightweight components, and then aerodynamics, the second, and the third is simulations through supercomputers. These are the three areas in which we work and apply in space technologies. We see this as an area, a research area for both our company and for the value chain in general, which can lead from the knowledge acquired on space to real changes in our everyday life. For instance, if we speak of our industry, in space you can build materials which cannot be built in on the Earth with light alloys that don't mix with gravity. I can do that in space, but not on the Earth. Or, for instance, space, I can work on elements because we have a vacuum in space that I can't do on the Earth. And the same is true for big data, communications, and so on. But let me also mention something else which we are doing in this region, Emilia-Romagna, the observatory that Councillor Koller was mentioning. We are bringing on board, this is the right definition, bringing on board companies that apparently have nothing to do with this industry. Let me mention a few that have accepted to be part of the observatory. So this is an item of news. Barilla, which of course operates in the food industry, has seen an opportunity, the opportunity to study how to feed the astronauts of the future. It's okay to give them some pills and tablets. Villade can mention something on this, but of course there are psychological issues when you are fed with pills that don't have a flavor. And then what we can do in space, we can bring back to Earth. Let me give you a silly example, but just to give you an idea. When we have cataclysms, earthquakes or floods, for instance, we try to bring help, aid to these populations. So we take quintals of rice, but they need hot water, fire to heat the water. We're just giving them an extra burden. So why not use what we learned for space? With just a few grams of proteins, I can provide the survival of several human beings in extreme conditions. How can create these conditions? Another company that is going to work with us in this area is Technogym, because astronauts need for physical exercise. Villade was saying that they need 2-3 hours of physical exercise every day to maintain your muscle tone. Muscles are not needed in Spain, or to a least extent. So they are studying this with astronauts and how to learn more from the human metabolism and how they can therefore change their gym machines, or telemedicine, another company that is part of this observatory, to provide biomedical information concerning the astronauts. And this will then be useful, for instance, here on Earth for monitoring my mother, uh, with special medical devices. So basically, these will have an impact in our daily lives. And those who will be at the forefront in this research will be those that had far sight vision. And then we always imagine the space as very distant, far away. Well, Imagine, and this is one of the greatest innovation made by Elon Musk. We have lifts, elevators that go up and down towards space stations and the moon. I don't know if you have an idea of how long it takes to go to the space stations, between 3 and 5 hours. It takes longer to go to Rome from here than to go to the space station. And Elon Musk is already building not only the space ships for humans, but also for shipping cargo, for the materials that I was mentioning. So shortly there will be factories, plants in space and on the moon. There is a company which is the first certified, private company certified to provide these activities called Axiom, and we're beginning to work with them. And it is the only certified to build the plant of the future in space. When will they build this? We're talking about 2024, 2025, very shortly. So we have to move swiftly. We're already running late. I have taken notes, Mr. Pontremoli. Has Elon Musk seen your machines? Have you given given him a preview? You can say this, we're among friends. Well, we have been studying his car, his machine, because he is very good at doing the electrical parts, but there is still to learn in the car industry. So we're getting together for this. You should show him your cars. Now, automotive is a mature industry. We write this when we deal with economics in our newspaper. Now, at this historical stage, is it appropriate to be focused on automotive, or should a company such as yours differentiate? And so what can happen in a few years' time with regard to automotive? What are your goals? In our company, we have three business units right now. Two, the historical race cars, 50% of our revenues, and then we have consulting for supercars, the road cars with other brands or with our brand. Our clients are Ferrari, Maserati, Lamborghini, Porsche, Bugatti. And space accounts now for 5% of our revenues. And my idea is to have one third, 33 of our company, working in the space sector. We're now investing in building the infrastructures to provide the possibility of doing what I just said. So the agreement with the Emilia-Romagna regional authorities is very important, because Colonel Walter Villadei will be the liaison in Houston for Italian companies. We shall be able to take advantage of this. And secondly, we're going to have to bring together companies that work in this direction, and that's the idea of the observatory. And the third is that of being able to conduct research as a company that will enable us to take advantage of all this. Our business unit 4 months ago hired a general of the Italian military air force, and he is now in charge of the aerospace business unit. We have the technical know-how, but we need someone who knows that world. So Alessio Grasso, the general, is now part of our team. So I'm sure that all his colleagues must be very envious. Thank you very much, Mr. Pontremoli, so that to meet you again shortly, so that you can tell us more about this activity. Now we have Paolo Tortora, Director of Chile Aerospace. Can you tell us how we can build a favorable ecosystem for research and development in a high-tech, high value added industries such as aerospaces? How does Cheery work, and how can you better help us understand how things work? Yes, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm very glad to take part in this new roundtable on space economy. So, how to settle to build a favorable setting environment? First of all, by settling an environment. Let's take example from nature. It's actually impossible to have a new species, animal or vegetal species, without the adequate ecosystem. And the settlement, the creation of a new ecosystem started about 4 years ago when we were witnessing some scattered initiatives, and we decided to create a real chain, an educational chain, which is now acknowledged as the first, second, and third levels. So the uh, undergrad, so the 3 year graduation, and then the 2 year graduation, which in Bologna is exclusively in English, and then the PhD. So on that occasion, we decided to focus all this knowledge in the Forli hub. And next to it, there is also the Giallita Institute, the first aerospace institution in Italy. And then there is the airport, as Consular mentioned, and then a consortium between the region and the municipality, and then in 2006 the Navy Academy was born. So we are acknowledged as the only hub of this kind in Italy, so a unique one. Also, Ferrara or Parma carry out specific research activities, but they don't have such a complex educational supply, as I call it. At the same time, different and several industrial activities had developed next to the academic supply, and I'm thinking of international players such as Augusta, Airbus, Leonardo, and so on. The turning point was about 10 years ago when a certain number of companies started to develop complete system, and we call these actors the systemists, so actors developing full complete systems. In Emilia-Romagna, we have three companies of this kind. One is called Curtica, which created a new helicopter from scratch after having been a supplier for many years of helicopter producers. And then the CITEL is another example, which is a leading company, a national leading company in terms of turnover, a private company, and with a headquarter in Forlì. So this is an ecosystem, as I said earlier. And we also have a cluster there. So a cluster is a facility which is envied by the whole Europe. It's called Cluster Mac. And then we have Flyer, which deals with bionic and aerospace. And in all this, we have the so-called ENAF, so the Astrophysics National Institute, and many other players, important research centers together with university and companies, all working together. So very fertile ground on which seeds have already been thrown. We are already actually grasping the fruits of our seeds. And to answer the last part of your question, how do we work? Well, we develop products, solutions with a low TRL. So we are convinced that we should not replace companies. We have extraordinary example of international companies, but our mission is accompanying them until the so-called technology readiness level of about 5, therefore helping transition from prototype to product. So we are, of course, willing and ready to support all the companies, all the regional companies who are willing to commit in this. So, thank you very much for your intervention. And my second question is now, is there any industry, sector, technology you're focusing on specifically, or because you feel you can be more effective, or you have an overall approach? What is your approach right now? But, but as a research center, any research center needs to specialize, need to have a specialism. Of course, when at the very beginning, an overall vision is needed, but today is the Interdependent Center for Industrial Research is focusing on microsatellites, small satellites, sure. And so, and I've just spoken about this in a previous round table, really speaking about small satellites of ASI and the contract that was launched 6 months ago. And I like to remind that in this contract, this tender, we have been involved in 6 out of the 20 proposals, and we have been involved for our technological contribution. So several are the international European missions which see our involvement, but also some of them are standalone initiative. I will give you a few names. For example, we launched a first mission of the University of Bologna in 2012, then the so-called EASIO mission, which was guided by our spin-off, which is called Alma Space, which merged with CTIL. Then we are working on microetzia and striving. So really, we have a 360-degree vision, but with a special focus on small satellites and small technologies. So a lot is said about increasing the use of small satellites, also for depth exploration, in-depth exploration, and it is basically a bond between, we provide a bond between science and technology. The first two satellites that travel through the deep space was done by one of our partners. That mission was really successful, and its success could not be foreseen, and was able to launch the company itself. So initiatives having quite an important echo, such as the one that we mentioned earlier, are very important to enhance also the companies working behind them. I have to admit, personally, I believe that space and the so-called new space economy is an industry where the addition of the single elements gives a result which is much higher. So 1 + 1 is not 2, is a much greater amount. So I really hope that this interest in the aerospace industry demonstrated by the Emilia-Romagna region, which has already been demonstrated with the concrete investments, can lead to the creation of a coordination center led by maybe the region, where all the activities, where all the aerospace activities can be put in synergy, because all the skills are there. What we need is just coordination and synergy. So thank you very much, and I wish you a fruitful work. And now Walter Villadei, our protagonist, the protagonist of this webinar indeed, because make us dream with your next commitments, your next jobs, which are uncomparable with ours. So really, things of the other world. So we look forward to hearing from you. So could you please tell us something about your work, your experience, a few words? Which are the main missions you envisage to take part? What you're working on? What's your deadline? Which are your deadlines? What about the deep space, to know and to get farther in the space? Please tell us something.
Good afternoon. First of all, and thank you for the invitation to share with you some of my reflections with our viewers and those colleagues that are listening and watching. This initiative is very interesting because, first of all, in identifying the panelists, you highlighted the major pillars of this country system made of industries, institutions, space agency, university, and the aeronautics and the defense department as well. Now, when we look at the future, we have to look at where we come from. In 2021, we celebrate the first flight with Yuri Gagarin into space. So if we ponder on how fast this technology has evolved, space travel, 60 years is nothing if we compare them with when Yuri Gagarin in 61 entered the Lavostok 1 with no certainty that it was going to come back to Earth. I'm saying that because in those years, Italy started immediately in playing a role of protagonist. This is the reason why we're now here to discuss and build the future. As of 1962, Italy was among the first country, maybe the first country in Europe, to sign a cooperation agreement with the US, thanks to those protagonists who are here. We had the Italian Air Force, the world of research and academia, and in a few years, from 1988 onwards, the Italian Space Agency. So, thanks to these intuitions, far sighted of those who came before us, we can now talk about a future which becomes an expansion of our technological and operational capabilities. Councillor Koller was saying this is a technological challenge. It is a major technological challenge made of skills, competencies, materials, pharmaceuticals, medical devices, all that is necessary to expand operation capabilities, also made of time. And an important element of this joint effort of the region here, Emilia-Romagna, and the Air Force, um, there are new investments with this approach, commercial spaceflight, with new players such as SpaceX that was mentioned earlier. So we have to be timely in our actions to be part of this. And the Air Force, and I will try in my small to contribute to this project, that of be a driver to bring our knowledge and our history in what is being done in the US. Where are the Americans going? They are going back to the moon. The approach will be different from that of the past, not as a touch and go. Uh, in other words, don't come back just after a few hours, but amplify our abilities to become residential on the moon surface. 400 kilometers, the space station, the moon is much farther. We shall be operating in totally different environments, no longer protected by the magnetosphere that protects us astronauts. We shall be entering a totally open space, open to factors which are extremely stressful for astronauts, radiations, absence of microgravity, and gravity related to the lunar surface. So the need to go in depth in themes, topics, and technologies which are not necessary right now in the space station. We can go to the space station in 4 hours, and so we will do more, much more than that, to be able to go to the moon. The Italian Space Agency and Italy is participating with its industry to the major initiatives, starting from the station that will be built around the moon as a gateway, and Italy will have um, a role thanks to its privileged relationship with the US and thanks to the traditional channels through the European Space Agency. And there is an opportunity thanks to the new approach provided by the US, not only just the major agencies, but now an increasingly important role, prevailing role of the private industry with new outlooks. The moon is of interest to the private industry, and Elon Musk is building ships for the moon and then later for Mars. But let's not forget that even in the Italian resilience and recovery plan, there is a, an allocation of resources, and there will be opportunities therefore, because in the future the space will be an environment inhabited by new players, and all this provides opportunities to provide the ingenuity, creativity, and the design and entrepreneurship that Italy can offer. In the agreement that was just recently signed between the Air Force and the Emilia-Romagna region is a first step in this direction to bring ideas, therefore, and then have them grow with an open approach, an open mindset, an inclusive mindset, starting from the Italian Space Agency, which has and will continue to have an important role. Before I ask you a second question, can you tell us what mission you have in the offing and when will you be leaving? The life of the astronaut is made up of gradual approaches to the end goal, which is that of flying. In my case, a flight has not yet been identified for me, and this will depend on the bilateral cooperation with the US. The mission that I have been assigned with and that I hope to launch shortly is, firstly, I will continue my training. I'm a cosmonaut because I trained in Russia since 2011. The US were outside the transport system, so all the astronauts were training to travel with the Soyuz. The current US path helps to expand our professionality for training in the US with NASA to better understand the new training protocols and complete the profile of an astronaut that has to be always ready, prepared for a mission. This is the first goal. Training is going to be completed, uh, and it is also an opportunity to be an interface with Italy, industry, the government authorities, Alenia Space, leader worldwide, that contributed to 40% of the International Space Station, thanks to an agreement signed in '97 by NASA and the European Space Agency. So this has enabled our country to grow in terms of competencies and skills. So we now have a new ecosystem which is being developed in Houston. I will be in Houston as a reference point for Italian institutions, the Italian Air Force, for the Italian defense to provide uh, ideas, guidelines on new technologies in which to place our role as a country. Thank you very much. We are proud to send you on this mission. One last question, and with this question we close this session. Do we have to become used to the idea that to be able to conduct research and work in space, there will not just be astronauts, but other researchers, private individuals? Do we have to get used to this new idea? Yes, absolutely. Yes, space will become more and more a daily working space, and other professions will have access to the physical space travel. The number of people and profiles will increase. for various reasons. One, new infrastructures will have to be built. The International Space Station provides astronauts the opportunity to fly, and NASA is already expanding it with the building of a new private segment which was assigned to Axiom. In the future, there will be new infrastructures, smaller, operated by private entities. China, India also are working at the lower orbits, and so in the future years we could have a European space station to host European researchers and astronauts. The profile of the astronauts will change too. Currently, astronauts are trained to be able to do everything: research, maintenance, emergency, a bit of managing infrastructures and facilities. In the future, we might see optimized professional profiles, for instance, research and experimentation. And so far, we've seen classical training paths by means of the space agencies. And in the future, we might see institutional government astronauts or industrial astronauts that come from industry to support the manufacturing and industrial goals. There is also the category, I don't like the way it's called, space tourists. I mean, they're not real tourists, but there are risks in space travel. So those who travel in space are called to go through a set of training and tests. So tourist is not the right word for these people that want to invest and have this experience. So to include my answer to your question, what is today a privilege of very few, thanks to the intuition and the investment of some countries, astronauts are the expression of a system made of companies and agencies. In the future, there will be an increasing number of astronauts, and therefore they will be able to populate the space economy in space. Thank you, Colonel. We can at last say to our children that becoming an astronaut is not a dream, it can be an ambition. Of course, they will have to study and train. I would like to thank you all for attending, for your kindness, for your competence, and for the attention you've devoted to this panel. Thank you very much for the precious contributions. And let me remind you that business does not finish today. We will have 3 webinars tomorrow, and we will have also Patrizio Bianchi, the minister, and other panelists with Luca De Biasi and Luca Cremolata, my colleagues. So all the very best. Have a wonderful evening, and we'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.